Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's Ask an Expert. This week, we are joined by the one and only Coach Daniel Stewart. And I am so stoked to be here with Daniel tonight. And before I kind of jump into learning more about you, Daniel, how are you? Thank you for joining us. How are you doing this on this Tuesday evening?
I'm super stoked too. I love that word. I don't think we use that word nearly enough. I'm super stoked to be here. Thank you.
That's amazing. I know stoked is a great word. And also it's like one of those words that if you say it, you kind of feel it. I don't know if
I
there's
immediately feel better because you said you're stoked. So
Yeah. Well, I love that. Strong start. And everybody who is joining us live, as always, please feel free to put your questions in chat. I will relay those to Daniel. And if anyone who's listening to the recording after the fact, thank you for doing so. And I'm just gonna jump right into it because I know we only have an hour here and we have so many things to cover. So rather than me kind of diving into your bio, Daniel, do you mind giving us a bit of background on yourself and kind of explaining what you've been working on for the last number of decades of your career?
Are you calling me old?
No,
I'm
no,
pretty sure.
X number of years, decades.
Decade. Okay, so hey, just so real quick, I grew up like I'm sure most of our listeners. I grew up on the back of a horse, but I learned really early on that as a young trainer, like teaching in summer camps as a kid, I learned really early on that what was holding most of my students back wasn't their ability to get their heels down or their eyes up. It was their either their fitness, their ability to ride without stirrups, without struggling, or their mental approach to riding, worrying about letting people down or not living up to others' expectations or comparing themselves negatively to others. The fears, failures, and frustrations were really interfering with their ability to find their best version. So I took that information. I went to university. I studied sports science. And then when I left university, I was able to marry together my knowledge of riding with my education. And then bang, I wrote a book, and then Trafalgar Square, the best publishers in the world, shout out, super stoked to be with Trafalgar Square. They published my first book called Ride Right, which was mostly biomechanics and sports psychology. And then we did Pressure Proof Your Riding, which was all sports psychology. My third book was Fit and Focus in 52, which is a fun calendar book of 52 mental coaching tips and 52 fitness exercises. And then my latest book, I'm super proud of it. It's called Bolder, Braver, Brighter, which is what I believe that we're capable of if we can just tap into our physical and mental potential. So yay. Oh, and I'm a father. I got 2 kids. I'm a soon-to-be empty nester. I have no idea what to do with my life. Super worried about that. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I love that. I mean, writing 4 books and father to 2, that's unbelievable. I don't even know how one is able to do all of that. And I don't know if you mentioned it, but you had told me previously that you are based in Naples, Florida. So at least you do have the sunshine to kind of support you on all of those endeavors, which is great.
It's funny because in my first book, and my publishers will tell you this, I have photographs of me I lived in Santa Barbara, California at the time. I have photographs of me with my son in one, the baby Bjorn, the little bag on the front thing. So I have pictures of him in the baby Bjorn, and I'm writing my book. And then in my third book, I'm writing it with my daughter. I'm in the pool on a floaty writing my book with my daughter. So just so that we know my priority, I know that people define me as a coach, and I'm proud with that label. But I am most proud of being a father and a husband to a brilliant wife. I cracked the code. I got a brilliant life. I got a wonderful wife and great kids. I just don't know what to do next year when my daughter goes to college because my son's already there. I'm gonna wake up and there won't be anybody to make lunch for.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
You'll find plenty to do. I have no doubt. You'll just write another 4 books.
Okay.
Gets their way.
I better get started.
Yeah, exactly. If we will all benefit from that. So I mean, you have such an interesting expertise with having kind of written about and learn about both biomechanics, sports psychology, and rider fitness. Like it's three of the most important things for a rider to know about. And I think it's become more relevant recently as riders really start to view themselves as athletes. Can you talk about, I mean, what is your current like time spent on? What's your current focus? Like what's your day to day? Like how are you applying these expertises?
You know what? It's a cool question, and I might surprise you with the answer because the coaches in this community, you know, those listening, um, we know how complex our jobs are. We live a 24-hour day, but we have to squeeze 26 hours worth of work into it. You know, riding 8 horses and training 80 kids. You know, this is interesting. If you look at any other professional coach, they would, like, if you look at a professional basketball, football, gymnastic, or tennis coach, they would never, ever be expected to compete on the same day that they're coaching. They would also never, ever be expected to wrap the leg of their athlete. They're going to hire staff for that, aren't they? You know, whereas the majority of coaches in our sport, we often struggle simply because we have to be everything for everybody, and there's not enough hours in the day for that. The number of coaches that I work with, and I have an instructor certification program helping coaches to figure out life a little bit, I suppose. There's a lot of demands on equestrian coaches. And one demand is a perceived pressure, and we need to be currently successful equestrian competitors in order to be valued as a good coach. That would be like saying, going to the Super Bowl, the football coach has to be playing football that morning to prove that he's capable of being a coach that afternoon. My life is dedicated entirely to being a coach right now. Okay, wait. My wife, my children, and then coaching. I wake up in the morning and I take notes. I go to the gym. I'm on the treadmill. I take more notes. I read books. I listen to podcasts on how to be a better coach, how to criticize with compassion, how to compliment without being condescending, how to train a 7-year-old differently than a 70-year-old, how to help somebody overcome something that's overwhelming them, like a fall or an accident. These coaching attributes don't necessarily come natural. And if you think about most equestrian coaches, we're wicked good horse people. And being a good horseman or horsewoman is a nonverbal trait, isn't it? It's that connection, that sensation, that feel, the perception. Yet being a coach is a verbal career, you know? So I just focus so much of my day on how to become a better coach, meaning a better communicator. In my instructor certification program, we talk about two things: an empowering message and an empowering messenger. I don't know that they're ever enough separate, but if you can be a great messenger, positive, empowering, good listener, not using bullying techniques to try and get the best out of somebody. And if the message that you're teaching is one that helps the student to become more confident and courageous and calm and concentrated, then I think we're onto something. So when I'm not with my wife and kids, man, I'm just studying how to be a better communicator and a better coach.
And is that coaching that you're doing, is most of that for both coaches and riders that's out of the saddle? Are you ever in an arena actually instructing riders?
Yeah. Thousands and thousands of horses and riders a year. So, hey, check it out. I cracked the code. I figured life out. So this is what I do, right? Monday to Friday, I'm a stay-home dad. I take my daughter to school. I make lunch. I have dinner with my wife. Yay. You get that. Okay. But every weekend I travel to a different country, or I'm sorry, a different city in the country. On average, I teach in between 80 to 90 cities a year. I have so many frequent flyer points, you have no idea. And a typical weekend would be, my clinics are developed for 12 horses and riders. So I'll show up at an arena. There will be 12 horses and riders separated into 3 groups based on level. And then I'll teach mounted clinics, but mentally focused mounted clinics. See, my goal isn't to develop mounted physical image of a rider. It's not about shoulders and heels and hips. Even my mounted clinics are focused towards mental coaching. So I will pressure my riders. I'll encourage them and I'll allow them to make mistakes and see how they recover, and teach them to learn from failures instead of feeling bad because they happen, to finish strong after slow starts, to stay calm and instead of getting tense, to remembering things under pressure when we typically get forgetful. So for about 4 hours, I'll teach 12 riders with their horses, real fun clinics. And then afterwards, we take a break. We bring in some pizzas or some whatever it is. We have dinner, and then I do a sports psychology seminar that night. And then the next day we wake up, we do more mounted clinics, and then we finish with a rider fitness boot camp, because I am the guy that believes that we are athletes. So I don't let them out of my arena until they've done a bunch of burpees and jumping jacks and sit-ups. And it's a whole weekend of performance. And I think that's kind of what I would be a performance coach, sports psychology, athletics, fitness, all of that, man, that just fills up one cup, and that cup is called performance. So so this summer I'll be teaching in 40 cities in 51 days. So lots of horses, lots of people, lots of work, and I'm just blessed that I can fill a program with that many cities. So I think the riders in this country are looking for more opportunities to improve performance, mental and physical, and I guess I'm the guy.
That is so cool, and it is so important that we do move in that direction, and, like, hopefully riders everywhere are able to have access to your expertise, because it is something that a lot of people have their in-person coach who are teaching them how to move up a level or kind of improve their score in the arena. But there's so much more that goes into that, both mentally and physically, that a lot of coaches aren't necessarily able to kind of opine on. So having that access to that expertise is so important. It's really cool that you're doing that.
Yeah, it's a neat instructor certification program. It's literally designed to help coaches be better mentors, messengers, motivators. And we're already brilliant horse people. If we could add brilliant people to that, holy cow, watch out. That would be just epic. So yay.
Totally. So as you're kind of in your instructor certification program, what are are there like common themes in those that you're teaching a lot of coaches, or is it unique to each coach, or what are like the main themes that you're trying to get across in that program?
So it's a completely self-paced online course now. There's four different instructor certification course. One is to teach a series of 5 different sports psychology seminars, and to be the kind of coach that can talk someone off the ledge. You know, the riders who are crying or who are arrogant, who don't want to listen anymore, who think they know it all. These riders, they deserve to learn, but they can challenge us. It's up to us to know how to teach each individual rider. So the sport, I have 4 schools. The first school is Equestrian Sports Psychology. Let's teach more trainers and riders to teach sports psychology seminars. Let's teach more trainers to learn the little tricks to turn the tears off, or to take an arrogant rider and help them to know that when they think they know it all, they stop learning. The second school that I have is a rider fitness school. And this is a pretty cool one. We teach a series of rider-specific exercises, and then in the end of the course, teach them how to build a fitness center at the barn, an actual gym at the barn, and different options on doing that, and what kind of equipment you might put in that room at the barn. And then the third school is a school on biomechanics, where you draw lines on a screen and look at angles and how this angle influences that angle, and the hip bone is connected to the knee bone, and yay. And then my last instructor certification program is the online mounted clinic coach, because we do have 13 mental coaching clinics that challenge equestrians mentally, not physically. And let me give you a good example. It's just when I think about it, I would never ask my son to do my clinics because I love him too much. So mental clinic that I would teach for riders, I would have a series of fences set up, and I would say, I want to know what you think. I want you to become a critical, independent thinker. I want you to stay calm at a time you might get tense. So here is your course. 424, end odd, count 3 and 30. That's their course. It means they need to jump any 4 fences they want. They're the course designers. I want to see what their decision processes yield. 424, count 3, end odd in 30. So they have to jump 4 fences, and the number on those fences have to add up to 24. So they have to think and make decisions under pressure at a time that the brain tends to freeze up. Oh, they also need to make sure when they jump those 4 fences, the last fence has to be an odd numbered fence. Oh, they only got 50% chance of that. And while they're doing 4, 24, and odd, they have to count out loud 3 strides so I can hear. And if they only counted 2 strides instead of 3, I might make them do sit-ups. Oh yeah, and they have exactly 30 seconds to do that. If they take 36 seconds, they probably have some more sit-ups to do. So if a football coach can give athletes exercises that stretch them, push them, and can still say, drop and give me 50, I think that if I'm going to respect equestrians as athletes, I should be able to stretch them physically and mentally and say, drop and give me 50. So in a regular clinic weekend, in my clinics, we probably do 1,500 sit-ups, like not each, but like as a team. And the sit-ups are super fun. You sit on a mounting block, you mimic the riding position, and then you canter, you kind of crunch as if mimicking the canter position. Anyways, so I have four schools, sports psychology, rider fitness, rider biomechanics, and then mental coaching clinics that ask riders to participate mentally, not just physically. And yeah, a lot of fun.
Well, when you do those exercises that seems almost impossible. One, is anyone ever able to actually do it, like the first try? And two, what is the goal? Is the goal to try to get riders to be able to critical think under pressure? Is that kind of the objective, or what is the objective of those exercises?
Okay, there's 3 objectives. Okay, so I've always said that pressure has the same influence on all of us. So when I say us, I'm not just saying riders, I mean humans. Pressure makes all of us do 3 things: go fast, forget, and freeze. We'll talk about each of them one at a time. We know that pressure makes us speed up. That's why when somebody public speaks for the first time, you better listen fast, because they're going to talk fast. It's part of the fight or flight. The release of adrenaline causes us to be tense and tight. Tense up, speed up. So under pressure, humans go fast. What we should teach ourselves is, at a time when we typically get tense and fast, we should teach ourselves to stay calm. Under pressure, humans go fast, forget, and freeze. Let's talk about the forget. There's this horrible thing called stress-induced amnesia. It's exactly what it sounds like. When pressure goes up, our ability to remember things goes down. We remember everything at 3:45 after work when riding in a private lesson. But when we go to a showground on Saturday and judges are judging and competitors are competing and spectators are spectating and the pressure hits us, it's really, really difficult for us to remember important things, because when pressure goes up, memory goes down. I found myself twice in the last 2 years, each time in my walk-in closet on the phone, freaking out with my wife because I couldn't find my phone. I was under so much pressure. I was in such a rush. I couldn't remember that I'm talking on my phone. And I'm not the only one in this community that has done that before, but it's clear that when I feel pressure, I'm not at my best. I'm not remembering things very well. And under pressure, we freeze. Humans go fast, forget, and freeze. Our sport requires us to think before acting. Let's take a show jumper, for example. Before any fence, they need to make a decision. Do I do a straight track or an angled approach? Do I collect or extend? When I jump this fence, do I open my left shoulder or my right shoulder because my next fence is in that direction? See, our sport requires us to think before acting. However, pressure turns off the thinking part of the brain. And I like this example. Someone is approaching a fence. They need to decide to collect or extend, and they're like, collect, extend, collect, extend, collect, extend, squirrel. And then they freeze up. They just can't think anymore. Humans under pressure go fast, forget, and freeze. My clinics are designed to teach riders to calm down instead of speeding up, to remember things at a time that they would forget, and to make good, rational decisions at a time when others might simply freeze up.
That's so interesting. And Daniel, one I think is it my internet that's having one of our internets is struggling. Are you able to hear me okay? Oh, I can't hear you now. I might have one second. Hold on one second. Can you hear me now? Daniel, I might have you turn your video off just to see if that helps. Can you hear me? Can you try to say something? Let's see if we can hear you okay. I think it might be. Huh. Yeah, okay. So people in chat are saying it's his connection.
Yeah, and I noticed that and
Yeah.
this is the
Oh, Daniel, I'm gonna have you. Do you want to leave the stream and come back? We'll see if that works.
I can, yeah. Yeah, Kinsey, I can.
Thanks.
Uh,
Here, I'm gonna. Okay, well. Everybody in chat though, Taylor, I see your questions, and those are really great questions. So I will for sure relay those over to him. And hopefully he will be back shortly. Taylor, they're all real. We have a problem. We have so many plants. We are plant hoarders. I feel like every time I leave the apartment, I get a new plant. Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. My internet's really strong. It's new, and it's the what I use for instructor certifications. It's really strong, but I got the impression that might have been me because my face started to freeze up.
Yeah, it honestly, who knows? Any that like there's always tech issues, but
How's the audio and the video? I'm literally on my phone right now.
yeah, no, you sound okay. I'm gonna just mute you while I talk because I think there's a bit of an echo. So hold on one second. Um, okay, so yes, this is all okay. I'll just mute you while I am asking questions, and then we'll avoid the echo. But yes, you sound and look great now, and we can jump right back in. So yes, you were talking about your instructor certification program and kind of the four themes that you're focused on with that. And one thing that you had well, now I'm the one with it. um One thing that you had said was about how you teach coaches how to handle when a rider is the rider who's like breaking down in tears, they're so stressed or they're so nervous, or the rider who is probably having like ego issues, or maybe they're overcompensating with arrogance or whatever it is. Can you talk a bit more about how exactly you teach coaches to work through either or both of those scenarios?
So there's a technique that I came up with a couple of years ago. I like to call it the T strategy, and it's a series of 5 different T's that help us to work through any issue that one of our students might be facing. And part of this is called scripting. You see, an actor performs really well when they know what to say, when they memorize it and know what to say. But if they forget their lines, then they feel the pressure and they become, well, less effective at their craft. So part of the T strategy has to do with creating almost like a predefined script. What can we say when we experience these different situations? And what we would say to somebody who was crying because they're fearful would be different than someone who is crying because mom is watching and they're afraid of letting her down, which would be very different than the arrogant writer that I mentioned earlier, who thinks they know it all and doesn't have to listen anymore. Our approach to each of them needs to be, I've always said there's not one sports psychology program for all riders. There's one sports psychology program for each rider. And one of the most important attributes of a coach is to listen and look at nonverbals. Who are they? What are they feeling? What are they experiencing? And if we can be mindful of what they're experiencing, then we develop a script that we can help each of them individually with. So the script is called a T strategy, and there's several different phases. And so the first phase is just to tell the rider that what they're experiencing, they're not the only one. Sometimes when a rider is experiencing a fear, if they're overcoming an injury, they might believe incorrectly that they're the only ones that have ever felt this before. But in fact, we've all been there. But sometimes when we feel that fear, we get the impression that we're broken or we're not as good as others, that sort of a thing. So the first part of the script would be to say, man, I get it. You know what? I get afraid sometimes as well. As a matter of fact, I was afraid just last week riding this crazy new horse of mine. The idea with the T strategy, 5 different T's, tell them that they're not alone. Tell them that, in fact, you, the coach, have experienced it before. And the idea here is to help them to understand. I like the way I like to put it is to remove the sting and stigma of how they're feeling. So if they're feeling fearful, oftentimes we feel bad about ourselves because we're feeling fearful. Let it go, man. We've all been there before. So the first T would be tell the rider how tell them that they're not alone. Okay. And then the second T that we can use is to teach them why they're experiencing that, why they're feeling fearful, why they experience arrogance from time to time. So, so this is interesting. Our brain survival instincts wants us to do everything that is slow and predictable because slow and predictable satisfies our survival instinct. However, riding is fast and unpredictable. The brain hates that. So when a rider is struggling with their emotions, they're tearful, they're anxious, they're nervous, instead of telling the rider, stop being nervous, what I would do is I say, you know why you're probably feeling nervous right now? It's because our brain survival instinct wants us to be slow and predictable, but we're on the back of a 30-mile-an-hour, 17-2 warm blood who's like wicked unpredictable because she's ovulating and has a wolf tooth. Oh my gosh. You're not weak, you're not a coward, you're just a human. What you're experiencing right now, it's just part of being human, man. So if I start the T strategy by telling somebody, you know what, you're not the only one that gets afraid. I get afraid sometimes too. It's normal. That's part of our sport. And the reason many of us get afraid, the reason you're feeling what you're feeling right now is because our survival instinct wants us to go slow and be predictable, but we love fast, unpredictable horses. Of course, we're going to get into trouble. And if your trouble looks like a few tears from time to time, I'm good with that. So do you see what I'm doing? I've developed scripts on what to tell riders when I see them struggling. What I would never say is stop being worried. Stop being nervous. You're fine. And here's the real reason. If a rider says, I'm afraid, and then the coach goes, no, you're not, you're just being a chicken. I just don't see how that's helping that rider overcome their barrier, their wall. It just doesn't, it just fortifies that wall. And it does what all coaches must spend every second of their lives thinking about, and that is to avoid creating the perception of shame in our students. If somebody says, I'm afraid, and I say, no, you're not, you're just a chicken. You see what I'm doing, don't you? Now they're feeling bad because they're feeling bad, and that makes them feel ashamed of themselves. Don't get me wrong, some old school coaches used to teach that way. A couple of coaches I grew up with taught that way. It never made me feel better. We know more now. We know how the brain works. If, as coaches, if we can remove the sting and stigma from feeling bad, from feeling fearful, for example, then we can, you know what we're doing? We're almost kind of like changing the subject. You know, the young rider is crying. All of a sudden I'm talking about horses being unpredictable. And I'm saying, dude, I get scared too. And then one of the other T's that we can use is the last one is to thank them. When they finally actually do overcome it, say, hey, listen, I want to just stop for a second and thank you. I know that what you just did was really tough. I know riding can be tough, but you proved you're just as tough. I want to thank you for believing in yourself as much as I believed in you. All right, let's get back to work. If we can tell them that they're not alone, if we can teach them why they're feeling that way, and then if we can thank them for making the effort, those are 3 of the 5 T's. And those 3 stand alone are probably enough to just let the silver lining come out, enough so that they can see forward and remove the darkness.
I think that's so helpful. And it's always good when there's any like actionable advice. Like it's not like you're giving basically a whole playbook of like here are the steps you can take when you're faced with a student who is overwhelmed and that's resulting in tears or whatever it is, a panic attack, whatever might happen. And like all of those feelings are so reasonable. We're doing like the things that we're doing on these horses are completely crazy by most people's standards. So validating that and kind of starting from that point of view, I think makes perfect sense. So Taylor has actually attended one of your clinics before, and she put some great questions in chat for you. She started with, she said, I'm a high achievement and goal oriented person. She's saying, how do I go about enjoying the process when the forward progress or results aren't clear cut?
So the definition of willpower is having the courage to overcome immediate gratification in the pursuit of long-term goals. Sometimes we mistakenly define willpower as just the ability to never quit or never give up or whatever. But in fact, one of the greatest strengths a rider can have is to understand that that the development of proficiency in anything is not linear. Oftentimes we think that we start here and we get better. And don't get me wrong, and for a period of time, that's the way it works. We start, if it's a graph, we start on the lower left-hand side, and in time we're on the upper right-hand side, and that line goes straight up. But there's one problem with that theory, and that theory is it's missing something called the plunge. Okay, so this is how we learn a new a new skill, mental, physical, athletic skill. We develop we define what our skill is going to be, and we practice it. Okay, we get better. We practice and progress, and then we plateau. And here's the problem. The plateau is the problem. All right. Now, most people think if we keep practicing that skill, we'll get off the plateau, but it doesn't happen. The only way to remove ourselves from the plateau is to accept what's called the plunge. Okay. The plunge will be a momentary, brief drop in proficiency. We have to get worse before we can get better. So we practice, progress, plateau, plunge, and then peak. But without the plunge, there's no peak. So here's a good example. A rider has been riding for 3 months now. She's got herself a pretty good leg. So I'm going to ask her to drop her stirrups. Now, when I ask her to drop her stirrups, her proficiency is going to go down. She's going to struggle. She's going to bounce around a lot. She might even come off a few times. But if I ask her to remove her stirrups in time, she's going to get back up to the level that she was on the plateau, but she'll exceed it, won't she? I remember reading this kind of a cool example. Let's say that we're really good at typing with 2 fingers. We can do 20 words a minute with 2 fingers. But I want to be better. I want to do 40 words a minute. So you know what I need to do? I need to type with 5 fingers, 10 fingers. But in the beginning, I'm doing all the wrong numbers. But in time, I start to be able to do more than 20 words a minute. I practice, I progress, and then I will plateau. And unless I'm willing to plunge, I cannot peak. The plunge is the most important part of any education, but it's what we all try and avoid, isn't it? It's that perfectionistic tendency of wanting to do everything and do everything right. The takeaway here is that oftentimes people with perfectionistic tendencies, they might find that they're really good at riding with stirrups. So they don't ever want to challenge themselves, because if they challenge themselves and are less than, they may let that hit their self-image or their self-view or their self-vision or their self-esteem. Do me a favor, when setting your goals, if you're doing everything right, you're doing something wrong. You have to have the plunge. So I've always said, when writing goals, please be prepared to write them in pencil, because what is the number? I think they say that the number 60 to 80% likely of happening is appropriate goals. If your goals are 100% likely to happen, they're probably just not ambitious enough. Correct? Yeah. Now, if your chance of achieving this goal is only 10% likely of achieving it, then maybe it's too ambitious. There's this sort of sweet spot, this Goldilocks zone of goal setting. So write your goals in pencil. And when you hit that plunge, feel free, erase that goal, change it with the new goal. But please be prepared for the plunge. Please look for it. If you're not doing it, seek it out, because if you don't plunge, you will plateau. And like I've said, I don't know, man, if you're doing everything right, you're doing something wrong. You're just not pushing yourself hard enough. You're not outside your comfort zone. I've always said that equestrians don't make mistakes. Mistakes make equestrians. They make us bolder and braver and brighter. But if we're afraid to make mistakes, and here's a cool little metaphor. You know how we're always told, get outside your comfort zone? You know who lives outside your comfort zone? Failure and mistakes. So if you have the guts, the resiliency, the grit to be outside your comfort zone, guess who you're going to bump into? Failure and mistakes. That's where they live. You're in their backyard. Instead of defining yourself as a failure just because you made a mistake or failed, define yourself as the kind of rider who has guts and self-belief enough to be out in his backyard. Just too many times we define ourselves as a failure because we failed, and that's just the wrong use of the word. A failure is never a person. It's a thing that happens at 2:15 on a Tuesday. It's an event.
That perspective is so valuable. And I can, like, as you're saying it, I can apply it to pretty much every aspect of life. It's like you have to be willing to like take a breath, take a step back, even if it slows your the growth of whatever you're working on for momentarily, it's going to be necessary in order to take like 2 steps forward, which I think it can be really hard. Like I totally understand where Taylor's coming from, where she's like, I'm really goal oriented and like I'm high achieving. Like I always want to be perfect and be improving, but it doesn't always work that way. So I think that's a really healthy way to approach things and for you to be teaching people. It's so funny. Like while you're talking, I feel like every other sentence is something that like I want to like write down and like I'm like, I need to remember that. I need to remember that. It's like, okay, well now it's just, yeah, it's like it's everything that's like so quotable, very, very quotable, which is really cool. So Daniel, you just mentioned goal setting, and that is one question that we received ahead of time is how do you instruct your students to be goal setting? Like what's the appropriate timetable setting their goals for? And is goal setting important for all students, or is it just for particular personality types? Kind of how do you look at goals?
So it's interesting. I believe my career began with goal setting. It's in all 4 of my books. So goal setting is certainly an important concept when it comes to mental coaching. And talk to any high performance athlete in any sport, and they will all tell you that without goals, there's nothing but trouble. What is it? If you wake up without goals, go back to bed. Like why? Like literally, what's going to drive you today? So goal setting, I believe, is really, really important. Now, it's more valuable, I believe, for certain age groups than others. When I work with an 11-year-old who has an 11-second attention span, it's difficult for me to ask her to sit quietly and to journal your thoughts, put them on paper, and tell me where you want to be in 20 years. Dude, they don't know what they want to be in 20 minutes. They don't, you know what I'm saying? So some audiences, in my experience, push back on deeper goal setting techniques, whereas others thrive on it. For an adult population who wants to know a whole lot, they find value in journaling. They find value in setting product and process goals, short-term, long-term goals. But can I give you one goal setting technique that's brilliant for everybody? Okay, it's called the GPS. Okay, so GPS is an acronym for 3 things: goal, problem, solution. And this is interesting. It goes back to that plateau perfectionism kind of a thing, that the plateau and the plunge. So goal, problem, solution. And it just means this: between you and your goals is a problem. If there's not a problem, it is not ambitious enough. If there is no problem between you and achieving that goal, it's 100% likely to happen. It is not ambitious enough. It's not hard enough. Erase that goal, make it harder. All right. Goal, problem, solution. Those are the 3 pieces of the GPS acronym. We start by defining the goal. Okay, so here's an example. My goal is to learn to do a flying change. Okay, let's say that's your goal. Okay. The next step is to identify the problem standing between you and that goal. There is a problem. If you don't look for it, it'll blindside you, and it'll make you doubt your ability to achieve the goal because you didn't even think that was going to happen. So here's a problem. My goal is to learn to do a flying change of lead. My horse doesn't change. Like my horse can't teach me to do it. Oh, curses. Okay, so I know what my goal is. I know what the problem is. What's the solution? This is the key. The entire focus on the GPS program is not on goals. It's on solving the problems that stand between you and the goal. So if my goal is to learn a flying change, my horse doesn't change, the solution would be to lease a horse for 2 weeks that changes, or to borrow a horse, or use a school horse, or do you see the process here? If there's no problem between us and our goal, the goal is not ambitious enough. We need to be mindful that it's called problastic thinking. It is the only time in all of sports psychology that you're allowed to think bad stuff. Okay, so identify the problem standing between you and your goal, and then find the solution to that problem. And when you solve the problem, you achieve the goal. But if you don't identify the problem, it'll blindside you, it'll trip you up. And for many people, it'll make you feel like, oh, I couldn't even do that right. Just remember, it's not about doing everything right. If you're doing everything right, you're doing something wrong. You've got to figure out what's wrong standing between you and the goal. So it's called the GPS, and I think it's really valuable for all of us to be mindful that There's things between us and our goals. We need to identify and solve those things, and then the door to achieving that goal will open.
Such another great, like, very tangible, actionable approach, which I think everyone is, me included, very, very appreciative of anything where it's like, okay, yes, I can go apply this right now to my approach to riding, or really my career, personal life, really whatever, what have you. Anything, goal setting is great in all avenues of life. So Taylor asked another question, and she's saying, how do you balance risk benefit as a parent and rider? What additional precautions have you incorporated as you've aged?
Oh, my age again? What the heck? Okay. Um, you want to know what? The one additional precaution that I bring to the barn with me now is I no longer worry about getting hurt. And let me back this up, okay? The whole self-fulfilling prophecy. What if I fall? What if I get hurt? What if I come off? That's called catastrophizing. And what we're doing is we're seeing the worst possible outcome and we're focusing on it. The problem is, be careful what you wish for. You might just get it. So the one way that I protect myself is I no longer worry about protecting myself. What I do instead is I arm myself with mental tools, and I exercise physically so that I can protect myself. So um, I'm a huge fitness guy. I just, and it's a part of my life. I'm the guy that if I don't exercise twice a day, I feel bad about myself. There's got to be some sort of twisted bad thing about that. I'm constantly stretching. I'm constantly massaging my muscles. I'm constantly preparing for 110-mile hikes or 250-mile bike rides. I just believe that I'm an athlete. And I know that if my muscles are strong and supple and sinewy, that if I'm flexible, I know that I can protect myself from potential injuries. I no longer worry about getting injured because, in fact, I live my life in such a way that I believe I'm lessening the potential for injury. So interesting. I guess the short answer here is exercise, be an athlete, take care of yourself, build a building that can withstand a hurricane. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and it doesn't have to be strong. I mean, if you think about a tree, it's not the strength of a tree that helps protect it from a windstorm. It's its ability to bend, correct, in that storm. So the first answer is, as I get older, I protect myself physically by becoming active and athletic. But the second thing that I do is I no longer, as I said before, I no longer worry about getting hurt. I instead fill my brain with more productive ways of potentially protecting myself. And I think this next tip is probably going to be the most important tip that I can give anybody, because 20 people can ask me, how do I solve this, and this? And there's only one answer that can solve them all. So here's a blanket you can put over any issue that any of our readers or listeners might be experiencing. We've all heard the term get in the zone, like not AutoZone, but the actual zone. Okay. You see, in the zone, fears do not exist. In the zone, perfectionism does not exist. In the zone, the fear of failure does not exist. The fear of letting somebody down or not living up to their expectation does not exist. In order for us to be our very best, we must be in the zone. Now, the good news is there's a neat way to get into the zone that all of us can benefit from. And that technique is called a Mojo mantra. So a Mojo mantra is when we repeat a chant or a rhythm, a series of words with rhythm and rhyme. Now, many of us know somebody who does mindfulness or meditation or yoga, and people who experience, those exercise programs, they're encouraged to chant, a rhythmical chant. So rhythmical chanting does two things. It stimulates the calmness center in our brain, and it creates what's called the flow state, where the flow state is the opposite of analysis paralysis, worrying about things. In order to get into the zone, we need to stay calm and develop that flow state. The best way to develop the flow state is by using a Mojo mantra. Let me give you a couple examples of Mojo mantras. Here we go. Push on, finish strong. Push on, finish strong. Rest of the ride, best of the ride. Rest of the ride, best of the ride. I can do it, nothing to it. I can do it, nothing to it. Do you hear those three mantras? They all have rhythm and rhyme. That's the key. To get into the zone, you need a flow state. But to get the flow state, you need to immerse yourself in rhythm and rhyme. So many riders will use a Mojo mantra to get into the zone. And it would look like this. I jump a fence. I hear that hard rub. I hear the fence hit the ground behind me. I am now sad. I know I can't be sad right now because I have 4 fences remaining. So I immediately go into my Mojo mantra. Push on, finish strong. Push on, finish strong. Rest of the ride, best of the ride. Rest of the ride, best of the ride. That Mojo mantra is going to do 2 things. It's going to calm me down and put me in the zone where fears and worries don't exist. But the words literally tell me what to do. Push on, finish strong, make the rest of the ride the best of the ride. So a typical Mojo mantra is, it delivers a message, but I believe that my favorite Mojo mantras have changed recently. The other form of Mojo mantra is, instead of telling yourself what to do, like push on, finish strong, you simply give yourself a series of words that help you to stop taking things so seriously. Let me give you a great example, a recent example. One young rider at the American or the eventing championships in Kentucky this summer, she came up to me and she was very sad. She's recently had an accident in water. Cross country day is today, and she must go through water, not just any water, head of the lake water, big water. She's really, really scared because of this recent fall. So I said, you know what I want you to do? I want you to come up with a Mojo mantra that makes you smile. Just take things less seriously, because we feel real serious right now. And I said, one rider came up with something that could work. You know what her Mojo mantra is? Fish are friends, not food. Fish are friends, not food. And for the first time in the conversation, the young rider started to smile. She says, I think that sounds fun for me. I think she's 13 or 14 years old. I'm not going to ask her to goal set right now. I don't think that's appropriate for her. But I will ask her to say fish are friends, not food, because fish live in water where she has to go. So I said, today I want you to come up. I want you to either say fish are friends, not food, or come up with one of your own Mojo mantras. It'll get you through that water, I promise. Now, I knew what her ride time was. So at ride time, I ran over to the head of the lake in Kentucky and I watched her. I saw the coolest thing. She comes over the hill. I hear her out loud. She's like, fish are friends, not food. Fish are friends, not food. She goes into the water and it changed. Just bubbles, no troubles. Just bubbles, no troubles. Just bubbles. She exits the water and she leaves and she's like, fish are friends, not food. She came up to me an hour later, almost in tears of joy this time. Guys, it wasn't about goal setting. It wasn't about systemic desensitization and all these techniques that have all these jargony syllables to them. Maybe what we're experiencing, when I mean we, I mean all of us listening, I want you to think about it. I want you to identify what is your thing? What is your challenge? Is it a fear? Is it failure? Is it perfectionism? I want you to identify it, and then I want you to build a Mojo mantra to solve it. I promise you, it will solve it. It will solve it.
I love that so much. That story is so much fun. I think no one could listen to that story and not just be grinning, because I think we've all been there, and we've also all seen those riders who are out there on course just like yelling and having the best time ever. And it's like, this is why we do this. Like this is the whole point of this whole thing. What are either, I mean, you could kind of take this either way, either on the rider fitness side or the sports psychology side, or both. Are there any like common mistakes that you see riders making in either of those pursuits?
Let's do this. Let's shift, because I know we're getting to the end of the program. Let's shift over to the fitness part, because we've been talking a lot about the mental. Can I tell you, and don't get me wrong, I don't believe it's a mistake that riders make when they're developing physical fitness, but our sport is incredibly unique. It's not like any other sport. I think the one thing that some riders could probably benefit from is to remember how unique our sport is, and as a result, create a fitness program that is just as unique. I don't believe that equestrians are going to value completely from a football or hockey inspired fitness program. I just don't see how that's really going to help us to develop proficiency in our sport. Our sport, so people think our sport's easy. People think that we sit and steer, but I think it's the hardest sport in the world, because I've never ever met a skier who had to yell at her ski because it spooked at snow. And there's no such thing as a chestnut mare tennis racket that refuses to load into the car. Our sport is super unique. It's unlike any others. So when it comes to the fitness program, actually, let me tell you a fun story. So, and I won't tell you the school, but I went to an Ivy League school. They hired me to teach the equestrian team how to do fitness. So I went up to the school. I spent 2 days at that school, and I was working with the brand new strength and conditioning coach for their team. Now, unfortunately, he was also the strength and conditioning coach for the football team, and he was really upset he had to work with the girls with the horses. He didn't like that idea very much, but he was new, so that was the straw that he drew. I taught him for 2 days how to do rider-specific exercises. So, for example, when you exercise, when you do a squat, I want you to have your heels down, your toes out, elbows in, thumbs on top, shoulders open, eyes forward. When you do a squat, when you close your hip angles and go down, I want you to push your hands forward like releasing your horse. See, if we can mimic our motion in our exercise program, we develop good muscle memory. So I spent 2 days with this young strength and conditioning coach teaching him how to use medicine balls, stability balls, exercise bands, hand weight, BOSU balls, balance boards for 2 solid days. I taught him how to take squats and jumping jacks and sit-ups, burpees, and turn them into rider-specific exercises. I then, a year later, called up the head coach of the school saying, would you please send me photographs of your equestrians doing their fitness program? I want everybody to see how dedicated they are. She sent me 4 pictures of 4 riders in the gym doing a football exercise. That coach didn't listen to me for 1 minute. He was there for 2 days with me. He didn't want to be there because he has to work with the girls and the horses. I taught him for 2 days how to respect equestrians as unique athletes. He didn't listen. As soon as I left, he said, over to the squat rack. I want you to do these same exercises that football players do. I think that if I could tell everybody, if I could give you one piece of advice, take whatever exercise you're doing and change it so that it mimics your riding position. Even if it's heels down, toes out, back flat. Because if you pinch with your knees and round your back when you're riding, if you exercise with your toes out and your back flat, that muscle memory replaces the incorrect, imperfect one that you experience on your horse. So when it comes to fitness, we are athletes. And you will do sit-ups in my clinic. But my sit-ups, they will mimic riding. The only way to do my sit-ups is to have the same amount of weight in each seat bone, good equitation, and balance. See, those are more important than sitting on a bench in a gym pushing a plate because they don't help us to become symmetrical. They don't help us to become balanced. They might help us to become strong, but strength is it's a slippery slope in riding, isn't it? Understand this. The bigger and stronger your muscles are, the stiffer they are. There's no way around that. That's why muscle men, they can't open their arms or their shoulders anymore. Their muscles have gotten shorter because they're stronger. I don't think equestrians need to be particularly strong with the exception of the core. I think we need stamina rather than strength. I think we need suppleness rather than strength. I think we need symmetry rather than strength. So yeah, my fitness program helps riders to remember that we are unique, and it trains us whether you're on the speed rope, whether you're jumping up and down off of a BOSU ball or have a medicine ball stuck between your knees, you are always in a riding position.
That is the best. And I think I've worked with a trainer, like, I don't know, probably 15 years ago, when I was really like had high pursuits in my riding career. And before I started working with him, I was like, but you need to know how to train a rider, because he'd never even seen equestrian sports yet. And so I sent him 100 YouTube videos, and I was like, just watch these and understand kind of what our body does. And he honestly, power to him, he watched all of them and was like, and then totally did our whole program based off of the actual movement of a body of the equestrian, because it's so different. And yeah, as you said, a skier is going to need different strength than a swimmer versus an equestrian. And just having a trainer who is educated on those kind of muscle groups, I think is really, really important. One thing, and I know we're getting here on the hour, so I'll ask this one last question and then we'll wrap it up. But I have to ask, you had just mentioned how important stamina is for equestrians. Are there certain cardio activities that you particularly favor for equestrians?
Yeah. So I'm going to sound like a broken record. Whatever cardio exercise you do. So In fact, what we're looking to do is something called specificity of sport. Specificity of sport means in any way possible, make your cardio exercises look like your sport. So for example, a rower will work out on the rowing machine. That makes sense, doesn't it? A bicycle racer will take spinning classes in the winter when the roads are frozen. That makes sense. Specificity of sport means you do whatever you can to make your exercise look like your sport. So in the boot camps that I teach after my riding clinics, we do equestrian kickboxing. But while you're kickboxing, you'll box, 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 then go to a 2-point position, box, 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 do a half halt, box, 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 do a jumping position. Okay, when it comes to cardio, because I understand so many of us are into that. I really love the stationary bike, but when I'm in the stationary bike, I'll go through like 1 minute rest, 1 minute intense bout, 1 minute rest, 1 minute intensity. The intensity phase is me standing up in a 2-point position. Elbows in, thumbs on top. I'm not holding the bars. My hands are on top of the bars. My back is flat. My belly is down. My hips are back. My toes are turned out. I'm on the stationary bike in a 2-point position. And if you go to my first book, there's an actual picture of me on my bike in a 2-point position. And if you take the bike away, it looks like I'm in a 2-point position. You can do the same thing on a treadmill. You can run with your elbows in front of you, with your thumbs on top. Same thing with the elliptical machine. Man, if you're doing cardio on a machine, good on you. I'm not here to tell you to change it. Just modify it, make it look like riding, and I'll leave that up to you, man. Some exercise machines will be more difficult than others, but even if you take a class, even if you take an aerobics class, just figure out how to make your jumping jacks look like jumper jacks. Just figure out how to make your squat thrusts look like I call it pat the pony. You got to jump up and pat the pony without dropping a shoulder, rounding. And my third book, Fit and Focus in 52, there are 52 of these exercises, 52 exercises that look like you're riding. So if a rider's interested in how to make this happen, and I make it sound very confusing, you make sure that you hit up Trafalgar Square and order Fit and Focus in 52. 52 really cool sports psychology tips and 52 rider fitness exercises that all look like riding.
It's so fun, and this is making me think. I think we need our next Ride IQ challenge to be getting everybody in the gym in their own gyms, like at like a public space with on the treadmill or on the bike, pretending like they're on their horse and videoing that, because I need to see a bunch of people doing that and all being shameless as they do it, because I mean, it is whatever works. And I'm picturing like bringing your saddle to the gym and putting it on the bike seat and really replicating what you would do on the horse. But we can get there. And I would love, yes, definitely recommend everybody go and get Coach Daniel's books. I mean, this is just a small snippet of the amount of expertise and knowledge that he shares on those books. And so it is such a wealth of knowledge that I think everybody really needs, because it applies to all riders across all disciplines and all goals, really. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a lower level rider or a top level rider, all of these things still apply. So thank you so much, Coach Daniel, for taking the time to share your expertise with us. And before I let you go, can you share a bit how people can find out about your clinics and if they're in their area?
Yeah, so my website is called Pressure Proof Academy, pressureproofacademy.com. And there they'll find lots of information on classes, courses, college, and clinics. So I do teach riding clinics to 90 clubs a year, 90 barns a year, but I also do private one-on-one phone conversations. So if people are really struggling and would like that, they'll find information there. I teach webinars. In the summertime, I teach sports psychology seminars to barns. They don't have to hire me for a full clinic. Just bring me in and feed me. I'll be fine. And then my college is, I have my 4 online classes, but not for instructors, for riders, for anybody. And then I have my actual certification program. So classes, courses, clinics, college, and certifications. They can find it all on pressureproofacademy.com.
At least you're not busy at all.
I have no idea. I'm a battery, I guess. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't surprise me just spending this hour with you and seeing how much energy you have. It is not at all shocking. But thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you guys all for attending this live and asking great questions. This was so fun as always. And I mean, with that, everyone have a wonderful evening. Bye, guys.